Just a reminder that the Missing Witches podcast is entirely listener-funded. If you love the project and want to support us and join in on conversations like this one live, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/missingwitches.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch.
Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch. Be a witch.
You must be a witch.
Let in the people, the beautiful, beautiful people. Oh, here they come. All the loves, people we know, people we haven't gotten to meet before. It's really such a pleasure. I feel sort of the waves as you arrive of ease and calm and joy. I don't know about you guys. This was a rough fucking eclipse season or a rough spring or a rough 3 years. I don't know, whichever perspective you want to stretch that to. But there's a robin outside my window. Magic is gay. Magic is alive. Gay is alive. Queer is magic. We are here. It's fucking pride. We can love and support each other. Tell stories of our queer, gay, trans, liminal magic and the infinity of ourselves, and love and support each other, and just be in the juiciness of these glorious guests. Let's pass the torch like a welcome. Let's pretend we're dancing around a circle. I am Risa from the Missing Witches podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. I'll pass it to my friend and collaborator, Amy. Do you want to say hi, little AMC?
I sure do. Happy Litha, everyone. This is the time when the sun is at its fullest bloom and we are just bathed in its light. And that's what we want to do here, is bathe in a little prismatic light, a little rainbow hinted light that the sun makes when it passes through different things, when it passes through a crystal ball, when it passes through raindrops, when the sun's light passes through all these things, it makes a fucking rainbow. So we're here today to enthusiastically say gay. Whether we are gay or not, whether we choose that word, whether we choose the word straight or prismatic, we need to say the words that are our existence. And so we wanted to come together and say with all of us here today, and all of you listening at home, our whole coven, gay. It's a word, but it's not just a word. It is a set of ethics and virtues and a way of being in the world. Queer, in the old-timey way, queer, different, strange, unexpected, all of those things. And as witches, regardless of our gender expression, regardless of our sexuality and how we express our sexuality, because we are witches, there is queerness in us. So let us celebrate that. We are different, and different is what we're looking for. So I want to pass the mic to Bex Mui. Oh, but maybe we should say who our esteemed panel is first. We wanted to invite people to this panel who are so queer that they actually put the word in their handles. It's not something that they allude to or maybe were questioning. These are the queeriest. So I want to welcome Bex Mui, House of Our Queer, Moon Fang, Queer Death Stories, Jasper Joy, Queer Conjure. Let's get queer. Let's say gay. Hi, Bex.
Hi. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. And so excited to be here. And yes, I really agree with what you're saying. For me, kind of House of Our Queer is queering up spirituality. And that's not just about the relationships we're in or who we're loving or how we're loving. It's this new and expansive, spacious way to think about how we engage with the things we can't quite see, the things we don't quite, add up with numbers and use our head for. And so really excited to be here. And for folks that are just newer to me, I'll just say I'm Bex Mui, she, her pronouns. And so I founded House of Our Queer, the spiritual play space, and I share affirmations for the queer and trans community there. Should I pass it? Is that? All right, so I'll pass it to Jasper.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jasper. I use they and he pronouns, and I'm just really excited to be here. I'm kind of a geek fan of both Vex and Moon, and this podcast is one of my favorites at the moment. I love this idea that because we're witches, we have queerness in us. And I want to share some definitions that I actually have of these words. So for me, witch means a guardian of elements, agents of change, and embracer of oddities. And queer is the sensual and embodied rebellion against all that is normative plus glitter. So if you are a queer witch, that means you are the spiritual tending to all things rebellious and glittery. So yeah, I am the founder of Queer Conjure and Tarot for Top Surgery. Tarot for Top Surgery is a scholarship program where we read your tarot, and that money goes to a person who is trying to fund their top surgery. And Queer Conjure teaches classes about tarot and meditation and witchcraft, and we have private groups, and we have a bunch of different sliding scale offerings. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll pass it to Moon though.
Wow, that was awesome. Maybe you could send me those words or post them because that was really inspiring. I'm Moon, she, they, host of Queer Death Stories podcast. I'm really honored to be asked to be here because I'm a fan of all y'all, even if I don't know you, because I love all queer people. And yeah, what can I say? I spend half my time making the podcast. And then now I have a zine, which if any of you want to contribute to monthly, there will be themes, message me. And I love our community so much. I feel like more and more just like coming out as a witch, coming out as a queer. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Moon, you posted something leading up to this event that you were excited to talk to us about how queerness made you and how witchcraft made you. Can you maybe start us out with that?
I never know what I post. Thank you. Yeah. I feel like it really is really an instinctual, just as being queer is instinctual, being a witch is instinctual. And I think like forged together, it's, they've been challenging things to step into, just like the death work that I do. But they've really defined who I am, if that makes sense. I think that's probably what I meant by that. Maybe. I'm also a Gemini, so is that what you meant? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Okay, good.
I was going to ask on a related note if any of you have stories about moments when your queerness supported your magic or your magic supported your queerness. I think for many people, many of our listeners, one or both of those identities might not feel safe all the time. And maybe we can offer some support in your own stories or experiences. Jasper, do you want to speak to that first?
Oh my gosh, I have so much to say about that. Let me think about the story that wants to come up the most. So I actually was raised in a witchcraft setting that was very heteronormative and transphobic. So I left magic for a very long time because of it. And then I found Cassandra Snow, and she has a book called Queering the Tarot. And the fact that there was a book that had queer and tarot like on the same cover blew my mind. the word queer is very much a word of power for me. So the idea that I didn't have to change myself to fit into a witchcraft space, I could like step into a space that was queer and magic, really blew my mind. Yeah, and I've just been holding on to that and riding it like a shooting star ever since.
Bex, did you want to talk about that at all?
Oh, yes. I love it as a question. I mean, there's so many ways. I think, the reason it is the most of what I do and being a queer witch and wanting to just lean into that offering, it's the way I build community. So have definitely found that. But when I think about this, I guess what it made me think of is kind of some earliest memories. I was raised in a really small conservative town off of Cape Cod, and I'm Chinese and Polish, and I was raised Catholic. And so I had all of these when I was growing up and thinking about just kind of learning about the world and spirituality in these ways. It was very much patriarchal. It was really, really cis. It was really hetero, and it was really controlling of women, especially, and women power. And me as a little one, I was also raised close enough to Salem that we went there every year. So I was raised just in my little brain, always seeing, Eve as the original witch and learning about the witches of Salem, just being like, wow, like, look at these powerful women, like, look at these ways that we can get together, like, look at the magic that can happen when you're a little bit outside. And I don't think that's what I was supposed to take away from it, but I did. Like, there was just something in me that was always, no matter what was actually being said, my little brain was like, there's something there, and there can be something there for me too.
I think just to go back to Jasper's story, that I think for myself and so many of us, magic was this place that like was welcoming, was open, was this possibility of expansion and flourishing. And then the heartache of discovering that there was this like really dominant school of magic that was anti-trans was like devastating to me to find out, and it didn't affect my life, my life directly. That must have been so difficult to navigate, and is such a kind of badass thing for you to take on so directly in your work these days. Insert question here. Sorry, I have feelings. I'm sharing my feelings.
Thank you for sharing your feelings. Yeah, I think letting the word queer be first, queer and then witch, has been really life affirming and life saving for me. And it also kind of acted as a portal, because as soon as I started using those words for myself, I started finding amazing queer witches. So I made a little poster pre-pandemic that was like queer full moon potluck. And a whole bunch of people came. I was like, where have my people been? So yeah, it's been, there was definitely like a lot of like masculine and feminine, god and goddess, positive, negative, anima, animus, like wording, very binary, very hetero, like the marriage of the god and goddess on Beltane, can lead to a lot of like turfy behavior. And that's initially what I ran away from.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ames.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I see Christina in the audience here, and I'm really thinking about this notion of the baby in the bathwater. Christina and I talked about this, about that there is, Bex, this is like the thrust of your project. There's so much value in spirituality, but we've all of us who are witches, again, I'll say it again, all of us who are witches have found something within these religious constructs that hurt us. Not just that we found, quote unquote, offensive or, not in line with our values, but hurtful, that hurts us to the point where we reject our own faith. The good part about that is that we need to constantly be interrogating our society, our faith, the systems that we are in. Recently, Grandmother Crow said to me that what a person believes dictates their behavior in the world. And those beliefs can be religious beliefs, they can be political beliefs, they can be beliefs about ourselves. You know, the belief that dictates your behavior can be that I am worthy. I am worthy of love. This can be a belief that dictates our behavior. So again, I mean, you're all educators in some way, in maybe a formal way or a less formal way, like a podcast. I would consider podcasters to be educators. So I really want to dive into like the political discourse on this. What the fuck could people be thinking when they want to ban any kind of discourse from education? Who feels the most angry and passionately about this, that we want to dive right into this? For those of you who are listening and aren't here live, Moon's hand was like a rocket ship, like, yeah, let's get into it. What the fuck? Don't say gay. What the actual?
I think we just have to say it so much more. You know, speaking, like listening to what everyone was just saying about queerness, I was thinking like, you know, death work, queerness, witches, all these like spaces are so liminal, and that's why they feel so good to me, and I'm sure to many of you too. Spirituality, of course, is right in there. And I think like we're reclaiming those things, you know, they belong to us, and always have, and they've just been taken from us, you know, historically. But I just discovered that, you know, when I was doing my death doula training, I was like, wait a minute, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, and this, and they all need to be like one word, you know, queerness stories, you know, but I am so angry, especially today. So one thing that I'm doing is like, I'm going through memes and I'm changing the language. Like if I see a cute meme, you'll notice I'll change the word, I'll put the word queer over top of he, or, you know, I'll put like they, or because I think, you know, that's my way of taking that little anger, you know, and turning it into something, like reclaiming it. But I don't know why. I feel like people who are trying to take it from us are very fearful of the power of queerness. And I used to think that was kind of like, you know, just my magical thinking, but I really do think that that's why. I think that they, you know, want to erase us because we are powerful. We fit into all of these spaces, and we're used to being outliers. We're used to being outcasts. We know how to create family. We know how to build things because we don't have a fucking choice. Sorry, little baby. I see you, Zoshan. I love you. But, you know, we don't have a fucking choice. We have to create these dynamics because people, you know, constantly are throwing us out with the bathwater, literal children, you know. So it makes me sick, but it also inspires me, you know, that these conversations are happening. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much hypocrisy. And again, why so many of us turn away from the church system in general. There's so much hypocrisy. I mean, so many times I hear preachers, literally pastors preaching about, trigger warning, killing gay people, killing queer people. These are pastors. And I'm sitting there like, Jesus ain't say that. Jesus ain't say that. And why are we focusing on like half a line in Leviticus instead of the pages and pages and pages and pages about loving each other? It's the hypocrisy that gets to me. Bex, you had a little hand.
I did. Yeah, I just want to, I do think it's from fear. I think it like there's movement and there's traction. And so there's like this response to it. I do consulting and equity work, and I focused on Don't Say Gay in some of my advocacy. And so some things I do want folks to know about it is the way they've written the policy is specific to instruction. So even though we're calling it Don't Say Gay, and it has that sort of effect of we shouldn't even mention it, we shouldn't say if we're out, it actually is only for K-3 and instruction. And so they're writing these bills really specifically, but we're taking them and they're being like, creating a lot of fear. So one thing is just like, make sure we're looking at what it is and what it isn't. And then also sometimes when we have in this, if you're looking at policy over time, a lot of times they have to put something on so we can name and actually see the beliefs, like you were saying, that people have. So like if you're looking at marriage equality, there actually weren't anti-marriage equality laws in different states. If you look at the arc, they were put on and then we had to take them off and then get it. So a lot of times it's not good. We don't want it. It's very frustrating. It's very bad. And sometimes it's naming the ways that people are, beliefs that people have in certain places. And when it's put on, we actually have a way to, advocate to say, this is not okay. And we can take it off and some change can actually happen. So that's the little baby hope I give myself.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up like word specific, because I did want to talk about this notion of vocabulary. Regina's in the comments saying like, I always knew that I was gender fluid. I just never had the vocabulary. And Jasper, I know that you use he, him, and they, them pronouns because you sort of want to disassociate yourself from cis men who, hurt you. Can you speak to like the necessity of having the vocabulary for who we are and how we feel? And Moon and Bex, if you want to jump in after on the topic of vocabulary, that would be.
Yeah. I actually had a really hard time figuring out my gender until I was 21, and I heard the word genderqueer for the first time. And I experienced it in my body as sparks. And that is the power of like spell work and magic and all of that. And queers are especially magical when it comes to vocabulary, because if that word doesn't exist, we're gonna fucking make it. Like, my child uses tree as a pronoun because why the fuck not? And yeah, not wanting to be lumped in with cis men is definitely something that comes from harm that I've experienced growing up in a world that sees AFAB people as a commodity, as disposable, as objects. But that's my stuff to work on. And like detaching harm from gender is just another gender queer journey that I'm on right now. So like that is a way that witchcraft and queerness intersect, is like creating language that we need, creating that vocabulary that validates us and lets people see us a certain way, and also calls our community towards us, I think is the really important part. And before I pass the torch, I wanted to say something about Moon, what Moon just said. Is that okay? Okay. So Moon said, like, we know how to be outcasts. And I love that. Like, I think that's where bills like Don't Say Gay come from, because when we say we know how to be outcasts, we're saying like, we don't need you, you have no power over us. And that creates like a big trigger of abandonment in the people who have the power. So I agree with Bex. I think that it does come from fear, and hate is like the blanket that's covering that fear. Because when we say we know how to live without you, the powers that be are like, oh, maybe who I am is not powerful enough. So
yeah. On the subject of fear and cis men, my spouse is one, and I think he would be okay with me saying this, but maybe it's society, who knows, but he has a tendency when he is afraid for that fear to immediately turn into anger. If something, the dog ran away once, and for a second he was very afraid, and then he was very angry, and that's how it comes up. And I've learned to recognize it and not, be super reactive to it, because I recognize that it is fear. But at the same time, for us in our relationship, let me just put it very, very personally, for us in our relationship, I have to keep reminding him, like, I recognize that this is fear, but when you bring your angry vibes into the room, that's traumatic for me. Like, I understand that you're afraid, but I don't want to be in a room with someone who's angry like this. And I feel like this is what our society has done, especially to men who aren't allowed to be afraid, but they are allowed to be very fucking angry and hateful and violent, but they're not allowed to be afraid. So I think that while we can have some compassion for the fear that people have of our overwhelming power and our ability to adapt and change and get into tiny holes like chipmunks, that other people spaces that other people might not be able to even get into, there's a limit to my compassion when people aren't recognizing that their fear has turned to anger and now they are actively hurting other people.
I have a question about that for the panel. We did a panel with Black witches, and Doc Bev said something that really sat with me. She said, our job right now, our magic right now, is to feed protesters no matter what side they're on, is to, like, we use our magic to care for people, to care for the people, like, on both sides. Like, she's like, I know you heard me, on both sides. Like, I don't care about their politics right now. We care for the people. Like, that is the spell. That's our, like, unmasking spell. It's our care spell or whatever. What do you think our care spell is right now? Our anti-hate spell is when it comes to Don't Say Gay, or when it comes to a whole raft of laws and attitudes that are attacking queer people? Like, what's our care spell? What's our move?
That's a really good question. I mean, I feel really almost reactionary in a way that I'm like, I only want to encircle queer people. And it goes back to, and that's just me. And that's like, every time someone tries to get me to do some kind of collaboration or something that moves me away from that, I'm really stubborn. And I think that came out of, like, when I was doing the death work training, and, I was using the name Moon, and that was, like, new for me also. I guess someone asked me, like, what my pronouns were. And I was like, I guess she, her, it was really new to me. And then eventually it's just become like they also. And part of the reason why I use queer up front and have changed my pronouns over time is because I want to signal, like Jasper was saying, like, to each other, and also draw each other closer. And, it's in solidarity. Particularly with trans folks. I think it helps normalize whatever normal is, because I don't really believe in normal, but the experience. It's like, oh, this is what people are doing. It's okay. We're not out to get you with our gay agenda. But all my magic really right now is really, to answer your question, is really just on our community. I don't have enough necessarily for everybody. So that's just me though, y'all.
Yeah, and we can come around to other care spells. Oh, go ahead. I see your hand, Bex. We'll come back to my question.
Okay. I just want to say, like, I think that's why, they say there's a space in the movement for everyone. There's a role in the magic for everyone. And we all need to be checking in on what do we have to give and what do we are moving and living in a homophobic and transphobic and racist and ableist world. And that's going to affect us all in different ways. And, I like the balance. For me, I do consulting where I call it like ministry. I just meet with, leaders in power who are small children in their hearts who were not prepared for this world and don't know most of the time what to do and how to be better. and then I give to the queer community and get recharged and refilled. And that balance works for me because I think because I come from such a conservative place, because I have such deep rooted love for my first family. And even when we have different beliefs, and I know that being close to people who believe different things has really continues to help me shape what I believe and who I am. And I am lucky and privileged enough to live in cities where I am abundant in queer community, abundant in queer connection, almost don't see really, and it's been a pandemic, I haven't really engaged. I don't have day-to-day interactions where I'm dealing with it, typically. And so I can have that space to do the work and to do the project and to put little breadcrumbs for folks who are trying to find their way out. And I think we all just have to do the magic and the spells that we have space for.
Yeah. This notion of community is obviously huge. Like we were talking about being outcasts. And when you're an outcast, you have to adapt and make new arrangements. Beck, you said your first family. I assume that means like your parents and the family that you were born into. But we also have chosen families, once again, especially in the queer community, especially in the witch community. We create these chosen families. Bex, you have made a church, and Jasper, your home is this. Can you talk a little bit about the home that you live in and how it functions?
Yeah, I can. It has definitely evolved, but I live in a house that is home to 3 queer single parents, and we have children, and we also have an AFL system. I don't know if anybody, it's like an alternative family for people with disabilities. So yeah, we all came to this house through queer nepotism. We share the gardens in the backyard. We have chickens. We drive the neighbors crazy. And yeah, there's just like, I don't know what I did right, but I live in this beautiful insulated bubble where, one of the single parents is now my partner, and we are both transmasculine in the same flamboyant, glittery, gay boy way. And then, it takes a lot of communicating and trial and error, and it's not necessarily an intentional community, but like we keep each other resourced in the most beautiful ways. And that kind of, that extends out to the rest of our community too. There are people in this call right now who have kept me well resourced in a time where I didn't know how to take care of myself, and vice versa. And that's basically the whole value system around my household.
Speaking of spells of care, your house is one. I do love hearing about the specific ways y'all practice magic, and I would love to open questions up, or even just stories of this intersection of queerness and magic, to the audience. So folks, if you do want to share anything or ask a question, you can use the reactions button at the bottom to do a little hand, and then I'll unmute you. If that happens, does anyone want to share their Litha plans? How are you celebrating this Litha, this pride, and how can we get inspired to queer our pride or to magic our pride? Moon, do you have any plans for Litha? Or summer solstice?
Oh yeah. I mean, starting with the full moon, just a lot of the things I'm doing now. So I just want to say, like, actually, unlike Bex and Jasper, I live in like a very conservative part of the country now. I came from magical land of Baltimore, and now I live in Orange County. And it is beautiful, and I'm grateful, but queer community is like non-existent. So that's part of the reason why, you know, I created the podcast, but to actually have these conversations. So a lot of the stuff that I do now is kind of solitary, which actually turns out to be fulfilling in a different way. I'm doing like rituals by the ocean, you know. So that's kind of my intention is to I'll be doing like a chanting mantra with some friends, and like a 24-hour practice into the solstice. And if anyone's interested, I can send that along, because right now, honestly, I can't remember what it's called. But I plan to just be at the ocean and, like, you know, keep channeling as much you know, power and you know, glitter and everything for our community. So that's me.
Someone in the chat said they're coming out to their parents this weekend. Do you, oh, so many happy faces. To all of you, I would like to actually hear an answer from each one of you. I want to hear about harm reduction. I want to hear about your advice. I want to hear about, even if you have thoughts on the notion of coming out in the first place. Let's start with Bex.
I'd need all day to answer all of those questions, all of which I have so many thoughts on, but I'll kind of narrow one thing. Just, yeah, it is a continual process. You know, the idea of coming out, it's just names that we live in a world that kind of expects we and socializes us to be one way, and in this spectrum of it, it's heterosexual and like cisgender and what that means and what that looks like. And so, yeah, the queerness, you know, and the expansiveness of our living into who we are. I love that queer community has space for our gender to be what it is, to our expressions to be what they are, for our relationships to grow in the ways that feel good. And sometimes bringing other people into that who aren't aware of the expansiveness of that, it takes labor, it's effort and work, and you become a teacher, and there needs to be often like patience and explanation. And so I think, you know, one thing I will say, I think that queer folks and magical folks that are living right now, particularly today, we're kind of breaking some lineage harm and family harm that's happened. And so I think of the labor that I do to bring in my first family and folks that I know that aren't, in breathing in the magic and the joy. I feel like that's helping to bring them on and helping to bring them in. And so I have space for that work, but it takes time. So just take care of yourself. Make sure you have your resources, make sure you have a way out, and also that you can, you know, say your part, but point them to the things. Everything's been written about, everything has a manual, everything has a YouTube and a podcast where they can do their continued learning. So also, you know, be sure to outsource as well.
Let's outsource the question to Jasper.
Yeah, I'm kind of a communication nerd. So when I think about coming out, I think about how to begin the conversation. And I like to suggest to people that they begin with what they're hoping to get from the conversation. So saying something like, I'm asking you to hear me and really see my bravery right now. And I'm telling you this because I love you and I trust you. And that kind of sets up the receiver for success because they already know what you're hoping to get from them. Now, whether or not they give that to you, I don't know your family. All families are different. But I think that coming forward this way is a way of magic. And yeah, outsourcing, like PFLAG is a thing. You know, they have support structures that they can go to. And also coming out as gender fluid is so cool. And I'm so excited. And I hope it goes really, really well for you.
Moon, what do you think about coming out?
Well, I've done it a lot. I'm probably the oldest of the three of us, and so I've had a lot of experience. Like starting in the '90s, like being bi and so on. Like when it was like really not popular. And I think like yeah, like you're saying, Jasper, it's really brave, and so you just have to give yourself an immense amount, like the biggest dose of like love and all the wisdom that you all just shared. I think is so beautiful. Not trying to be too attached to the expectation of like what someone is going to say. People write to me all the time these like little private messages about these experiences, which is why I love the work that I'm doing. And it could be, the first response might be like, unpleasant, and then it might sit with them, and maybe it'll. My own mother, my family of origin. I'm adopted. I have a whole lot of history, like all of us. But they're finally like coming around to be like pretty strong allies, and very late in life. My mother just told off someone at like a crab feast back home, like who was saying like, about gays, and she's like, you better watch what you say, like, and then called to tell me, and I'm like, that's right, Mom, you go fucking tell them. She's like, I did, and I got up and left that table because I was like, it was hilarious. Like my mom is woke, awesome. But yeah, what a great time to come out. Honestly, like there's so much. It's like, you can be who you want to be. If you want to be a tree, we support you. That's beautiful. I had a great conversation with my friend's kid who's 11 and was telling me all about pansexuality, and just like, I'm so hopeful for the future. So like, even if your family of origin doesn't get you, we get you, and we have you, and you can find us, and we support you. That's it.
Yeah, I think a lot of, I'll use the word excuse, I guess, the excuse that parents, loved ones give for when their fear turns to anger on the subject is that they want you to be safe. They know it's a dangerous world for queer people, and they just want you to be safe. And we can understand that. But at the same time, I think we can ask them if that is their response, like, can you help me make the world safer for queer people, instead of asking me to deny who I am? And I think that that's a fair question. So with that question, say the parent responds, how do I do that? Bex, my mom wants to know how she can be a better ally. What do I tell her?
Ah, absolutely. And I love that idea of inviting folks in. And, instead of trying to change ourselves, which we know just causes so much harm and or hate. And so love that. I think, like Jasper was saying, PFLAG exists. There are just so many resources. I think the first thing that, parents can do if they're saying, what it means, they have their own learning to do, right? Their own understanding of the expansiveness of and the joy that comes with that expansiveness. So I would definitely encourage them to look into that. One of the things that I lean on is also the connection between gender binarism and like white supremacy, and just really understanding that the roots of these systems are the same, and that it was, the idea of the gender binary as it exists now and the traps that we're in really came and was enforced here and isn't natural to this land or the people that are here. So I would also look at, what was happening in the Indigenous folks in the land that you're now occupying, and like, how was there spaciousness there? How was this just allowed this spaciousness, not just even in the queer community, but something that really was here on the honoring the folks that were here before us, and just doing some of that research for themselves.
Yeah, I spoke to an Innu artist who reminded me that the Inuit didn't have this vocabulary of she and he. Everyone was a them, as we say in English, you know. So when people say like, oh, this newfangled this and this newfangled that, that's very incorrect. That's very incorrect. So once again, if somebody comes up with you at you with that argument, then you can remind them that actually, if you want to be an actually person, you know, we all have to do it sometimes. Actually, this idea of the gender binary is more new than the idea of an expansive spectrum, right? Yeah, we're nodding. We're nodding. Can somebody speak more about the intersection of queerness and witchcraft? I feel like there's so much. For those of you who are listening, I'm putting my hands together and I'm threading my fingers together as a visual demonstration of how I see queerness and witchcraft. So for those of you who can see me, can you talk about why this is? Is it strictly outcast plus imagination equals queer witch? Like, there must be more to it than that.
I think that's enough. I think that's perfect. Yeah, I'm just gonna I'm gonna say that the place where the two connect is at the heart. So it's my belief that above all else, a witch is led by their honestly open heart. And like you were talking about, kind of the grammar police that come in and say, well, you can't use they, them as a singular pronoun. It's like, actually that grammar correcting is part of white supremacy too. So it's actually three things that are connecting, that like that anti-racism work, that proclaiming yourself as queer, and being a witch. Like, I think, and I cannot remember who said this, so if somebody else remembers, but magic is changing consciousness at will. What I think Doreen, somebody, I don't know. So when we're practicing anti-racism and we're practicing magic and we're practicing like queer advocacy, we're looking to change consciousness. And I think that is kind of the weaving together of all of those fingers.
Yeah, just on the subject of the grammar police, I did have this conversation with a friend of mine, and it took me a minute to get my head around it, but only a minute. And once I had gotten past like is, are, okay, you know, all of that, then I was like, okay. So a friend of mine said, and I said, we do it all the time. Oh, somebody left their hat here. Are they going to come and get it? I don't know. Do you know whose hat that is? Do you think they're going to come back? Oh, they left their hat on the bench. We do it all the time. We do it all the time. It's just when people ask us to do it somehow that it gets complicated or confusing. Moon, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, it goes right back to that, like what I was saying earlier, when you look at things that already have, it doesn't have to be like girl this or he that, you know, it's so much better if it's they, you know, or I like to change it to queer, but like it's already there. It's it just pisses me off or makes me laugh at the same time. That's all.
I like it from a queer ecology's perspective too. We have people in our coven who pointed out they embraced the they them pronouns as a way of recognizing that as bodies we are more matter of other beings than we are human, that we carry an infinite world of microbes and bacteria with whom we collaborate on our existence constantly. So that eased me into my own theyness for sure.
Yeah, something that we mentioned in our book, we were talking about a very controversial character, Zsuzsanna Budapest, who is the founder of Dianic Wicca, which is turfy, so trans exclusionary. But Zsuzsanna herself describes femininity, I'm using scare quotes for those who can't see me, femininity as having infinite variety. So it's interesting to me that she would choose those words, infinite variety, and yet exclude part of that infiniteness. Because we are infinite. You know, we've been talking about vocabulary, and we've even talking about the plurality of our bodies, not just how we feel inside our bodies, but our bodies themselves. I don't know where I'm going this. Maybe I'll use. Again, to me, it keeps coming back to this interesting hypocrisy of saying one thing and doing another, or, you know, saying that Jesus is the truth, the way, and the light, and also we should literally murder people who don't behave the way that we do. And again, I don't really have a question. I always want to just say out loud, in the same way that we're saying words and educating about other ways of being and other ways of thinking. I just want to sort of like take a highlighter and highlight the hypocrisy as much as I can, because people, like we said, you know, our beliefs inform how we behave. So if our beliefs are like fully hypocritical, what do we even do with that? Again, that's more of a rhetorical question, I guess. But if anybody has an answer, like, how do we contend with such rampant hypocrisy in our society, is maybe my question.
One thing that I talk about with people when I interview them and try to get them to talk about their queerness, if they're not already into it, or their witchiness, or their, you know, those intersections, is I find that sometimes people are more identifying with like how both of those things have been suppressed and, you know, pushed into the closet, or pushed, you know, into like spaces where you're afraid to, you know, to claim it. And I do think that it's extremely hypocritical. And also, like, I'm starting a new project called Queering the Moon, with my friend who's been doing all these, like, you know, she's an astrologer, and maybe I'll be reaching out to all of you to see if you want to come talk with us at some point. But part of it is like what you're saying about you know, the femininity, that is really a space that I'm kind of like stuck on lately, because like I love femininity, but also I'm like, where is the inclusivity? Where is the, you know, the layer, where are the layers? You know, because if, you know, it's about birth, and we're all part of that, we're all connected, and why does it have to be, you know, so like, I mean, it's not, I guess it's just, it bothers me. And so it inspired me to do another project, because I'm like, there has to be more, you know, conversation about queering everything, you know.
I want to say something about, well, first, yeah, I identify as femme really, like, intentionally, because I think there is just the history of misogyny, especially around belief practices across so many different religions, is just, and our society and all of our systems, is so strong. It is so laden in all of the things we're doing, and it is a part of transphobia. That is not irrelevant to, you know, femphobia is not a part of this conversation. It's and I think that is because it's deeply powerful, and it deeply connects all of us and anybody in any identity, with our own intuition and with our own bodies and with our own knowingness in a lot of different ways. And so I also think that when you were asking around, queerness and magic, I think one of the ways and that connects is because from a really young age, we've looked around at the things we were told and at the ways we were told to be and at the ways we were, expected to behave and thought to ourselves, no, like that's not right. There's something wrong here. And we somehow knew we had our own agency to make something, to be different. And that is our first magic, right? That's our first spell, a releasing of ourselves from the expectations of the world and maybe our first families and maybe our teachers and maybe our priests or whoever it was. And I think there is, that helps us to do more spells, to learn more magic, to build bigger community. It all comes from that first real spark.
Bex, you told us once, maybe not in these exact words, but please expand, that astrology, tarot, these are tools of queer spirituality. Can you please expand?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons I actually have a chapter in my book called Queer Spiritual Practices, Astrology and Tarot. So I very much say this and I very much believe this. And, it is just empirical evidence. Just, we are using it. If you're talking about it, we have normalized it in queer community of your signs, or you don't know them, but you'll be asked them. There is just we've normalized that, moon rituals, following the moon, and also practices of tarot. I think it's because so many queer folks have been either pushed out or rejected or raised without institutional religion. So there's more space in our community for other ways to connect, other ways to feel small, other ways to understand our place in the universe and in greater things. And so I think astrology and tarot have really taken on those practices. And I like the balance of them because I feel that astrology, as we practice it as a community, helps us to do the feeling small part that I think is really important. The knowing that we are one part of a bigger thing. And the tarot is that other balance, which allows us to say, and I have agency. And I can build a practice that helps me better understand myself and what I want and name where I'm going and the internal growth.
We've got a coven mate with a question. Julie. Hi, Julie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this lovely conversation. I have a question about this concept of queering everything, which I think Moon mentioned. It's something I've been thinking a lot recently. For myself, I'm less interested in identifying as queer, and I'm more interested in a queer process, which for me means I'm opting out of compulsory heterosexuality. And I mean, this is something everyone can do. And so I guess I want to queerness and talk about this idea of I'm queer, that person's straight. When it's we can all opt out of compulsory heterosexuality. We can all opt out of a particular gender performance. And so I'd love to hear from you about if you have any ideas of how to bring that to people who consider themselves straight, who consider themselves cis, who, upon further inspection may realize they're not, or may just realize that this internalized queer phobia they are projecting on to other people. I think many oppressive structures, they hurt everyone, not just the marginalized individual. And I have this sense that people holding on to these particular notions of, well, I want to be an ally to queer people, but I am straight. And why is it so important to identify as straight? What is that? I don't really know what that means to be straight, other than maybe in a dating profile, you're trying to indicate who you're open to dating. But in the real life, I'm more interested in what are we all doing to take down these normativities? And I would throw into the mix of that amatonormativity, which is the prioritization of romantic relationships over other structures, which I view as very, very interrelated to all of this. And sometimes queer folks perpetuate imaginonormativity as like part of the liberation dialogue. So I just shared a lot, but like basically my question is, if you've had any thoughts of how you talk to quote unquote straight cis people about these things.
Yeah, I am really curious about this question. And I think I'm trying to understand this idea of why does calling myself straight matter? And this goes along with why the word cisgender matters. Because if I'm saying I'm queer, that is me like highlighting something that like it's a hardship that's worth bearing for me. Yeah, I'm struggling. Maybe one of the other two can speak, because I'm struggling with this idea of queering everything, which I love, but I also want to not dilute the practice by like, if everyone is doing it, it's no longer queer. I'm struggling, so maybe someone else can.
I'll go. I mean, I think like the queering of everything is just, it's saying that we need to take up more space. And so literally there's all these like, you know, practices for the divine, and there's practices for, you know, every kind of straight thing is available to you. My project, the person I'm working with was leading like a group of mostly, you know, straight, mostly cisgendered women who, you know, were worshiping the divine. And where we met was like, we need to do something for our community. We need to keep queering the conversation. And to kind of speak to what you're saying, Julie, you know, I love what you were saying. Like when I interview people, and they're like, well, I don't really know if I identify as queer. And I start talking to them about like, you know, well, do you consider yourself like a non-conforming person? Because usually we're not in conversation if you don't. Like, let's be real. I'm not going after the people that, you know, I want to talk to people that are a little bit weird, a little bit out there, you know, and like to rock the boat. And then they start sharing like, yeah, well, you know, I'm poly, or, you know, I have relationships with women, or, you know, same sex. And so I'm like, well, that's why queer is so beautiful, because it is really inclusive. It doesn't talk directly about who you fuck. It's really about like how you don't identify in the, you know, the samey world. And you're like, I am, you know, more comfortable in this kind of like, you know, fluid space. And so I think when people identify straight, you know, sometimes they don't even know what they're saying, you know, or maybe they just haven't had the right experience yet. You know, they're just one, you know, experience away from questioning. And so maybe this pride that'll change for them. But I don't know. That's just my take on it. I do try to talk to people about that when I can.
I agree with these. I think it's a great question, and the idea of, you know, can we queer up our relationships? And I would throw, you know, monogamous normativity to that as well. You know, just being able to opt in. I think queerness, because we didn't have models for so long, we were, you know, forming our relationship, kind of forced to form our relationships without models, and in so doing, found, as we all did in all the areas of queerness, spaciousness, agency, autonomy, things that were truer and better for us. But what I think something that sticks me a smidge, and maybe Jasper, this is something that you're thinking of. The thing is also, we've put in that labor. Queer folks have been kind of forced out and then are living in a still heteronormative, cisnormative world, fighting for these things, fighting especially for visibly queer, and not having the privileges of heteronormativity in a still privileging heteronormative world. And so, yes, it's great. I want everyone to be able to like form the relationships they have, to form the community they have. But there's also a history of us doing a lot of work and labor, continuing to be marginalized, and then folks who aren't in that of experience being like, that looks great, I'm going to take it. I'm going to go do that now. Isn't that for me too? And so I think there's a really delicate balance of just understanding that history and how we can, as you do that, to bring the liberation of queer and trans folks with you, or center it as that's happening and as that ripples out, because it doesn't always and often doesn't happen when change is going on. It still, doesn't always like ripple to where it started. So just like hone in for folks to just kind of manage like their privileges around that as well. And I also like something you said around like getting between this allyship. Like, yes, like we don't want folks to be like, I'm a great ally, and so I'll do this, but also, yes, be in it with me. I think I like that. I think that is the path towards liberation when we are in this together. And Alok says something, who's a non-binary, incredible activist and artist. And they were being interviewed about, they're also kind of have their own femme expression, where part of their activism is keeping their body hair and talking about it while also identifying and showing sex, really femme, high femme ways. And it's incredible. And they have they were being interviewed once, and this person was like, how can I help you, right? Like, how can I be there for you, and like, what do you need so that you can live? And they were like, I'm living, right? Like, they're like, I am living, I'm free, and I want to know, like, how are you being trapped by the gender binary in the suit that you're wearing, boring man? And they didn't say this is absolutely paraphrasing, but the idea was kind of like, yes, please help me, and like, how can I help you? Like, how can we be in this together so that we are both like freed, from these constraints? And I think that approach is really important and can have more freedom for all of us.
Bex, can you say the name of the artist that you were just talking about again, and maybe spell it for me?
Yes, at ALOK.
ALOK, a lot.
Yeah, I can send it in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Tanis, you're always there for us, buddy. Thank you. Dropping it in the chat.
I've been thinking so much about Tanya from Earthbound Futures, who we interviewed. Similar, and then to hear the story is really similar. She says that when she started like removing her facial hair when she was like 13, and it was this like secret, it was a secret that cost her so much, like it was exhausting. And then when she went through a series of experiences in her body and in her life that allowed her to feel like she could share that, and started to grow in it. One, it was exhausting in ways that she was totally unprepared for. Like, it felt like her whole body and her whole life was just like bowled over and needed to just adjust to the exhaustion of being seen in new ways, to being constantly alert, to processing fear. So I think that's, and something that a space, a gift that we can give each other when we are around friends who are coming out or who are like taking these brave steps, is like, how can I treat this like the act of fertility that it is, the act of like birthing that it is? Like, how can I support you in helping you birth the world? Because that's part of what you're doing for all of us. And I've had people do it for me when I had a kid, and I think we can do that for each other. And then she also said, like, she felt queer ancestors stand up. Like, she felt the presence of ancestors that couldn't be seen before be seen around her. And that is like it's an emotional story for me when I think about it. And I hope that you feel all your queer ancestors standing and being like, we aren't in the archives, our stories couldn't be told, but we exceed the archives because of the lives that you're living and seeding. I want to come back to this question because I do want to hear this as like kind of your gift to the listeners. We're going to share this audience for Litha. Maybe it's something you're going to do, or maybe it's what they can do. What's your strawberry ritual? What's your solstice offering? What should we all go and do together today, sweet friends? Bex, you got one?
Sure. I would say, yeah, I think there is something really powerful about ancestry and queer and transestry. And as you were talking, I was just like chills and energy and flowing. So I'm really big on looking at and thinking about queer folks in our own lineage and thinking about the folks that have come before us and, you know, paved in this way that do really hover and watch. And around Pride, it's, you know, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, really thinking about those folks that started the riots and were there. And so I always like have little altars for them and dig and learn and read over their quotes and see what wisdom they have for, you know, us today. So I'll do that, and I encourage y'all to kind of look at your own roots and find the chosen ancestors that are waiting to connect with you as well.
I'm so glad you brought up Sylvia Rivera, because she's not as famous as Marsha, but she also took a lot more fucking heat. She was angry, every right to be angry, about how trans women especially were being treated in New York at the time, in the world, just in New York. But she was booed at gay liberation marches by, I think, if I'm remembering my history correctly, cis gay men, mostly. And there was this controversy over RuPaul's Drag Race. People were saying RuPaul was transphobic because RuPaul was saying, well, trans women are women, so there aren't women on this show. So it's kind of like, okay, we get it. Like, we, you know, trans women are a big part of the drag community. And at first I went into it like, you know, there are way bigger enemies, surely, in the queer community than RuPaul. But then when I kind of sat with it for a minute, I was like, it hurts more. It actually hurts more when someone who is an ally, I'm using scare quotes again, it hurts more when someone that you think would be on side turns out to not be on side. So what do we do when we find prejudice within our safe, brave spaces? What do we do when we're not talking to like straight pastors who want us to die, but rather like people who, yeah, I mean, what do we do? What do we do?
Yeah. Again, this comes to language for me. And often what I say is, I would like you to pause and try to understand why that might be painful for me. And the first layer you have to get through is the defensiveness of like people digging their heels in and being like, no, I'm not homophobic, or no, I'm not transphobic. I have a transgender friend, you know, that kind of stuff. I'm so glad that Sylvia Rivera got brought up too. I actually just went and grabbed her picture off of my ancestor altar to share with anybody who can see. Marsha's actually standing right next to her in this picture. Yeah, so something that Alok Vimanan does that I think is beautiful is they get a lot of death threats and hate mail and all kinds of stuff, and they approach it with love. And I didn't, you know, I used to be like, no, we should approach them with bricks, but like every time they get some sort of like, you are ugly and disgusting, or, you know, something like that, Alok starts with like, I am so sorry that somebody hurt you so bad that you now have to hate me. So that is the approach that I have been trying to take lately, because I kind of want to be the one who throws the first Molotov cocktail. And so like I'm learning to resist that urge.
Yeah, I do. You know, we're talking about Pride Month, so we have to sort of talk about Stonewall a little bit. We're talking about Sylvia Rivera. We're talking about throwing the first brick. I mean, there's got to be a space for that too, right? I mean, we're all loving each other and supporting each other, and we're saying, I'm sorry that something hurt you, but at what point do we throw the first brick? That's an actual question. Work. when loving doesn't work. Bex, I feel like you have an answer for this too. When do we throw the first brick?
Well, I am a little of the let's not throw bricks at each other, because we are throwing bricks at each other and it hurts. I am really afraid, honestly, of some of the ways in which queer community can really dig each other down. And I think that is a part of oppression. I think that is encouraged by systems. I think they want us fighting at each other instead of at them. I think that, yes, it hurts more. And I think that hurt and that pain should be acknowledged and valued and addressed. And also, I think that we've been put to get LGBTQIA plus everything, all of our gender, all of our sexuality, all of our relationships, how and who, all of the things have been, oh, well, you're one community because we decide, like, because there's a normative over here. And like, there's power in that. And also, we don't know each other's experiences. When you factor in race, when you factor in ability, when you factor in culture, the idea that we're supposed to and can, have this expectation to fully understand what other people are going through and always say the right thing, always do the right thing, and like keep up. It's a job. It is my professional job to keep up with queer community, queer terminology, with equity, and it takes work. And I look at trends. I also look at some, I think there's not it's not an accident that elders, that especially gay, lesbian, and older trans folks have a longer learning curve. And I think if you look at who's considered a TERF, there's usually a generational gap, especially if we're looking at queer folks. I think the learning that needs to happen hasn't been done. I think the trauma that's been experienced, living in what heteronormativity, cisnormativity looks like when they were growing up hasn't been healed. And like, I just think there's so much. It's so easy to throw bricks at each other. And I think let's save that for other people.
Let's save those bricks and build a house of our queer is what I want to say.
For sending them, I'm gonna train them up.
Yeah, I'm gonna build something. That's so Bex. Oh, I'm gonna build something out of those bricks. I'm not gonna hurl them at cops yet. When Jasper and I run out of love, that'll be way far in the future, though. I feel like it's pretty infinite. I do want to say one thing though that Julie's question made me think of, and that's that White Feather Hunter says that magic is a process, not a product. And maybe we can apply that to queer and queering as well, that it is a constant and infinite process and not a product like capitalist pinkwashing would have us believe that once a month we're going to be super inclusive, but only if you buy the Target range of Pride t-shirts. None of, or these, I was talking to Sherry Schoen the other day about Juneteenth and the same phenomenon of like, you can buy the napkins with for your barbecue with Juneteenth on them, or you can go and seek out like a Black owned stall at your local farmer's market. And if you want to talk about emancipation and liberation, that's probably going to be the better choice. And in Pride Month, I think we can find that too. We can be deep in the process and sort of not so much the products. Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion piggybacked off of that really quick?
Mm-hmm. Please do.
Yeah, if I buy rainbow stuff from Target, not gonna lie, but I'm also gonna encourage people to donate to queer places. Like the Trans Women of Color Collective could always use donations, and the Harvey Milk Foundation. Harvey Milk is why we have a rainbow flag in the first place. So if we're talking about respecting our trans and queer ancestors, that's a place to start.
That is a great question that you didn't pose, but we've got Marcia and Sylvia and Harvey. Who else should we put on our altar today? Who are some of your queer icons and heroes that maybe our listeners have a picture of on their altar or have never heard of at all? Let's talk about icons of joy and transgressive joy.
Joy. Joy is my surname, and Joy was my mama's middle name, and she is the most powerful queer ancestor that I have. So may not be on everybody else's altar, but she should be. So put a purple flower on there.
Would you be willing to send us a picture of her for the show notes for this episode so we can make a collage of people? It's just an idea that I just had right now, so sorry for it not being formulated at all. But if anyone, in fact, anyone who's here today wants to send us a photo of, oh, I'm sorry, I got distracted because someone in the chat just said, some people think Jesus was queer. Some people, so, you know, we're pretty inclusive about Jesus. My personal belief is that he was married to Mary Magdalene, but that wouldn't stop him from being queer. You can absolutely be queer and be married to someone of the opposite sex. But I want to ask, like, Moon, who are some of your queer icons that you want to put on this altar today?
I mean, there's so many, you know, the ones that jump out to me usually tend to be writers like Oscar Wilde, Gertrude Stein, James Baldwin, you know, just all the poets. And I mean, yeah, Cookie Muller, Random, Divine, you know, just of course Baltimore stands out to me. There's too many.
Yeah, we certainly are not able to complete an exhaustive list. Someone in the chat said Margaret Cho and Roxane Gay, also wonderful, wonderful choices. Bex, who are some of your queer icons?
Yeah, I would say Cecilia Chung and Chella Man. Young, they're young, but still like just having bringing some API folks into the group space, like as well.
Adrienne Marie Brown.
Patron saint of activism.
Yeah, Monica Show, love her.
Leslie Feinberg too is worth noting.
Yeah. Send us your queer ancestors. Send us your badass queer aunts. We want to know their stories. Put them on our altars. Share this story for solstice. I will come back to this as maybe my last question as we circle towards our end here. Jasper, do you have a ritual for the people for solstice?
Do I have a ritual for the people for solstice? I have been really into simplicity lately. So I think just having a fire and laying in grass if it's accessible to you, and making yourself remember that you are the divine connection between clouds and roots. So whatever ritual, whatever prop helps you remember that, bring that in, remember your breath. Remember that we are all part of this interconnected wisdom. Yeah, and let it be inspirational and creative.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, I have to repeat that. You are the divine connection between clouds and roots. I'm going to put that in my pocket and keep it there ever. Thank you so much for that, Jasper. That was awesome. I'm getting a t-shirt. I do want to say one thing really quickly. We commissioned a ritual for each of the Sabbats, and we did invite Star Felice to be with us here today, but Star was unable to make it. So they are going to be doing our ritual. For those of you who are Patreon patrons, come back to Patreon on the solstice. And for our speakers, drop us an email. We'll send it to you too. Shh. We'll send it to you too. So if you are for some sort of ritual, you can join us on Patreon, and Star Felice will be doing the offering for this Litha.
I want to close us out by reading from our Litha chapter, if you'll allow me. Amy wrote this piece. She wrote this incredible piece about Z Budapest and about discovering heartbreaking ancestors, about trans exclusion and the way that that has been like a heartbreak at the heart of our witchcraft, but also with a lot of love and sympathy to these feminists who came to witchcraft often because of an experience of rape or violence and tried to make circles of safety against patriarchy and fought really fucking hard to be safe. And I had an experience working on an event for basic income, for guaranteed livable income here, which is something that I'm passionate about because I think everybody should fucking have an income and a right to live. And I collaborated with a group of women who were incredible advocates for basic income, who were Asian women. Their title were Asian Women Against Prostitution. And other groups that we approached to work with us wouldn't work with them because they also advocated to make prostitution illegal for the Johns. And all these women were frontlines workers in rape crisis centers who saw specifically what was happening and worked really hard to get Asian women and people safety and an income. And they wanted to be allies for that work for everyone. And I just think it's complicated, and we need to make expanding circles of our safety. And that is witches. We make circles of protection and love and understanding for each other. Try to take those bricks when we want to throw them. And so I wanted to read this piece that Amy wrote because I find it so moving. And it's in our book, Missing Witches. And I will say a final plug. Bex Muy's book is coming out, House of Our Queer. It's fucking rad. We got to read it and write about our love for it. Fang's Queer Death Stories is an incredible podcast. Queer Conjure brings so much rad work to the world. Our speakers are people we admire and learn so much from. So find and support their work. Help Moon queer the moon. Let's all be involved and interstitial in each other's lives and liberatory work. So Amy wrote, years ago, I took my father back to his hometown in Hungary. This was after his dementia diagnosis, after he had come to live with me. And every day, sometimes every hour, he would ask, when are we going to Szeged? I knew it wouldn't be long before he'd be incapable of travel. So I took all the money I had and I poured it into plane tickets to fly to a place I had never been, so I could go for the first time with my father to the place where our blood came from. Over dinner on our first night in Hungary, my father's brother, my uncle, went on an insulting, sexist monologue about my mother, whom he hadn't seen in over 30 years. He claimed she wasn't a good cook and she dared to have a job, so she wasn't a good mother. I loudly announced that as a working woman, I would be paying for dinner. We left the restaurant and I cried in the streets. The feeling I had was similar to the feeling of discovering some of Z's politics. Why? Just why? I came all this way to see you. I was so ready to connect. Healers and scientists can harness the power of natural poisons and turn them into medicines. It's a very witchy thing to do. We make medicine from poison, art out of grief, grab calm from inside a storm. So what do we as witches do with these disappointments, these poisons hidden among the flowers, these thorns among the roses? We harness their sharpness and power to carve a welcome sign and hang it up on our doors. on the missing witch's door and in the doorway of our hearts. Come inside, join our circle. You are welcome here. Thanks for being here. Love you.
Happy Litha and blessed fucking be.
Blessed fucking be. And magic is gay.
Can everybody turn on their microphones and let's get a blessed fucking be from everybody?
Blessed fucking be.
Yeah.
Blessed fucking be.
Yes.
Blessed fucking
be.
I want that book. The book is
Blessed fucking
amazing.
be.
We'll send you the book.
I'll send you the book.
I want you to
Send
be
it
on
back.
my show. I'm gonna write to you. That was powerful. Thank you.
Love you guys.
Everybody say gay.
Yay!
Happy
Hey.
You must be a witch.
Just a reminder that the Missing Witches podcast is entirely listener funded. If you love the project and want to support us and join in on conversations like this one live, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/missingwitches.